When we first moved into Willow Creek, it felt like stepping into a dream. The neighborhood was picture perfect, like one of those places you see in magazines or movies. Every house had neatly trimmed lawns, flower beds bursting with vibrant colors, and streets so quiet you could hear the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It wasn't just a place to live. It felt like a fresh start for me, my husband Ryan, and our two kids. We'd saved for years to buy our little colonial-style home with its cozy porch and big backyard. On the day we moved in, I stood in the driveway, taking it all in. The air smelled clean, almost too clean, like someone had scrubbed the sky itself. Everything around us seemed to sparkle with promise. But perfection always comes with rules, and Willow Creek had plenty of them. From the moment we walked through the door, we were handed a thick packet labeled HOA Guidelines. At first glance, they didn't seem too bad. No lawn decorations unless it was a holiday approved by the HOA. House paint colors limited to a strict palette of beige, gray, and white. Cars parked on the street, not allowed, even overnight. These weren't just suggestions. They were commands, written in bold letters that screamed authority. I skimmed through the pages while unpacking boxes, chuckling at some of the finer details. Who cared if your mailbox leaned slightly to the left? Surely, no one would notice or mind, if things weren't absolutely perfect. But then came the first note. One morning, as I unlocked the front door to grab the newspaper, I found a slip of paper tucked underneath. It was typed in crisp block letters. Your mailbox is leaning slightly to the left. Please address this within 7 days. 7 days. For a mailbox. I stared at the note, half amused and half irritated. Was this really necessary? Ryan laughed when I showed him later, brushing it off as some overzealous neighbor trying to keep up appearances. It's not personal, he said. They're just trying to maintain standards. But the notes kept coming. The next week, there was another one about the height of our front hedges. Then a warning about leaving trash cans visible after collection day. Each new message felt heavier than the last, like invisible hands tightening their grip around our lives. I started noticing other signs too. Neighbors exchanged polite smiles, but rarely stopped to chat. Kids played quietly in fenced-in yards instead of running freely down the sidewalks. Even the birds seemed quieter here, as if afraid to disturb the pristine order of it all. At dinner one night, I brought it up again. Do you think anyone actually cares about how straight our mailbox is? I asked Ryan, stabbing at a piece of broccoli with more force than necessary. He shrugged, still calm. Probably not. But if we want to fit in, maybe we should just fix it. Fit in. The word stuck in my throat. Wasn't moving here supposed to be about building a life where we belonged? Not bending over backward to please some faceless committee. That's when doubt crept in. Beneath the surface of Willow Creek's perfection, something darker lurked. Something controlling. And as much as I wanted to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that this place wasn't quite what it seemed. The invitation arrived exactly 2 weeks after we moved in. It was a glossy flyer, neatly tucked inside our mailbox, stamped with the official Willow Creek logo. Welcome new neighbors. It read in bold letters. Join us for a meet and greet at the clubhouse this Thursday. The design was polished, flowers decorating the edges, a warm message promising community and connection. How could I say no? This was my chance to finally meet the people behind the manicured lawns and perfectly painted shutters. Maybe they'd be friendly, welcoming. Maybe I'd find friends here. Ryan wasn't as excited as I was. Do you really want to go? He asked, glancing at the flyer over his coffee mug. It's probably just going to be boring small talk. But I insisted. We're new here, I reminded him. If we want to fit in, we need to make an effort. He sighed but agreed to tag along. The clubhouse turned out to be even fancier than I imagined. Tucked behind wrought iron gates, it looked more like a luxury resort than a neighborhood gathering spot. Inside, chandeliers sparkled above rows of folding chairs arranged with military precision. A table near the entrance held trays of finger sandwiches and sparkling water. Everything about the space screamed wealth and order. People milled around, dressed impeccably, pressed slacks, blazers and heels that clicked against the tiled floor. I suddenly felt underdressed in my simple sweater and jeans. Then she walked in. Margaret Hensley, president of the HOA. She swept into the room like she owned it, her platinum blonde hair styled to perfection and her tailored navy blazer commanding attention. Her smile was wide, almost too wide, like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. As she took the stage, the chatter faded, and everyone turned their eyes toward her like obedient students waiting for instructions. "Good evening, neighbors," she began, her voice smooth and confident. "Thank you all for joining us tonight. First, let me extend a warm welcome to our newest families. We're thrilled to have you here in Willow Creek." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Our community thrives because of one thing, our shared commitment to excellence. Excellence in how we care for our homes, our streets, and each other." Her tone shifted slightly then, growing firmer. "But let me remind you, any deviation from our standards will not be tolerated. Our rules exist to protect the value of your property and the harmony of this neighborhood." I felt a chill run down my spine. Protecting property values made sense, sure, but harmony? What did that even mean? And who decided what counted as excellence? Margaret's speech went on, detailing upcoming inspections, landscaping guidelines, and penalties for non-compliance. Each word felt heavier, more suffocating than the last. When she finished, polite applause filled the room. I scanned the crowd, searching for reactions. Some nodded approvingly, while others avoided eye contact altogether. One woman caught my gaze, a tired-looking mom clutching a glass of water, and gave me a quick, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Was that a warning? On the drive home, Ryan broke the silence. "Well, that was intense," he said carefully. I didn't respond right away. My mind was racing, replaying Margaret's words. Who was she to decide what kind of life we should lead? Why did everything feel so calculated, so controlled? That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something unsettling. Willow Creek wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a system, a machine designed to keep everyone in line. And now, whether I liked it or not, I was part of it. Things escalated faster than I ever expected. It started with little things. Notes slipped under our door, emails flooding my inbox, reminders that felt less like friendly nudges and more like threats. The mailbox incident was just the beginning. One Saturday morning, as I sipped coffee on the porch, I spotted Margaret herself marching up our driveway. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement, each step echoing like a countdown to something ominous. "Good morning," she chirped, though her tone was anything but warm. She held a clipboard in one hand, pen poised like a weapon. "Just doing my rounds. Lovely weather, isn't it?" Before I could respond, she launched into a list of complaints. Our rose bushes needed pruning. They were overgrown by half an inch. The garage door had scuff marks from when Ryan accidentally bumped it with the lawnmower. And then came the kicker. Our wind chimes violated noise ordinances. Noise ordinances for wind chimes. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "They're barely audible," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How can they possibly bother anyone?" Margaret's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "Rules are rules," she replied coolly. "You signed the agreement when you bought your home. Surely you understand the importance of maintaining standards." I wanted to argue, to tell her how ridiculous this all was, but instead, I bit my tongue. Arguing with Margaret felt like shouting into a void, pointless and exhausting. That night, Ryan and I had our first real fight since moving to Willow Creek. He thought I should just comply. "It's not worth making waves," he said, scrubbing at a spot on the counter like it was the most important thing in the world. "We knew there were rules when we moved here. But who makes these rules?" I shot back, throwing my hands up. "Why do they get to decide what kind of life we live? What if I don't want to live in some cookie-cutter fantasy where everything has to be perfect? Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I get it. This place is intense. But fighting them isn't going to change anything. It'll only make things worse. His words stung because deep down, I knew he was right. Or at least partly. Standing up to Margaret wouldn't be easy. Still, every time I looked at those stupid notes or heard the faint tinkle of our wind chimes, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Something about this neighborhood wasn't sitting right with me. It wasn't just about rules anymore. It was about control. And I hated feeling controlled. Then came the anonymous note. It appeared late one night, slipped under our front door while we slept. I found it the next morning, lying innocently on the welcome mat. My heart sank as I unfolded the paper. In blocky, uneven handwriting, it read, "You don't belong here." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Who wrote this? A neighbor. Someone on the HOA board. Or maybe it was just a random act of cruelty, meant to scare us into submission. Either way, it worked. For days afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Shadows outside the window seemed darker, longer, more menacing. Paranoia crept in, wrapping itself around my thoughts until I could barely focus on anything else. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table staring at the note, Ryan walked in. He saw the look on my face and sighed. "We'll figure this out," he said softly, pulling out a chair to sit beside me. But his reassurance didn't help. Deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Willow Creek wasn't just testing our patience, it was testing our resolve. And I wasn't sure how much longer we could hold on without cracking. After finding that anonymous note, paranoia became my constant companion. Every sound, every shadow, felt like a threat. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Cars idling outside our house late at night, neighbors glancing at us with unreadable expressions, even the faint hum of whispers when I passed by on my morning walks. It was as if the entire neighborhood had turned into a stage, and I was the unwilling star of some twisted play. But fear has a way of waking you up. Instead of retreating, I decided to dig deeper. At the next HOA meeting, I arrived armed with questions, not just about the rules but about who enforced them and why. Margaret was already seated at the front of the room when I walked in, her clipboard resting neatly on the table beside her. She looked up briefly, her lips curling into a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. For a moment, I hesitated. Was this a mistake? What if pushing back only made things worse? Still, I took a seat near the back, trying to blend in while keeping an eye on Margaret. The meeting began like usual. Updates on landscaping schedules, reminders about trash collection, and polite applause whenever someone mentioned community pride. But halfway through, I raised my hand. The room fell silent. Margaret tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Yes," she said, her voice clipped. "I have a question." I began, standing slowly so everyone could see me. Who decides what counts as a violation? And how do we know these rules are fair? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others exchanged wary glances. Margaret's smile faltered for just a second before she regained her composure. "The guidelines are clearly outlined in the agreement every homeowner signs," she replied smoothly. "If you have concerns, you're welcome to review them." "That's not what I asked," I pressed, my voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside me. "I'm asking who interprets these rules, and whether anyone holds you accountable for enforcing them." Margaret's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, another voice spoke up. "She's right," said Claire, a woman I recognized from previous meetings. She stood now, her arms crossed over her chest. "Last year, I got fined because my front door was painted a shade of blue they deemed too bold. No one even told me ahead of time. It just showed up in the mail." Murmurs grew louder as other neighbors chimed in. One man recounted how he'd been penalized for hosting a birthday party because balloons tied to his mailbox violated visual standards. A young couple shared how they'd been reported for leaving their curtains open at night, claiming it created a distraction for passersby. Each story added fuel to the growing tension in the room. Margaret tried to regain control, raising her hands to quiet everyone. These policies exist to protect property values and ensure consistency across the neighborhood, she insisted, though her tone wavered slightly. Without structure, Willow Creek wouldn't be the desirable community it is today. But her words no longer carried weight. People were restless, emboldened by the realization that they weren't alone in feeling stifled. After the meeting ended, Claire approached me in the parking lot. "We need to do something," she said urgently. "This can't go on." Over coffee the next day, we hashed out a plan. Claire suggested forming a coalition, a group of neighbors willing to push back against the HOA's iron grip. At first, I hesitated. Fighting the system felt risky, maybe even reckless. But then I thought about the anonymous note, the endless inspections, the suffocating pressure to conform. Something had to change. For weeks, we met secretly, in basements, backyards, anywhere we could avoid drawing attention. Slowly, others joined us. Parents tired of living under scrutiny, retirees fed up with fines, even a few younger couples eager to reclaim their freedom. Together, we gathered evidence, photos, letters, testimonies, all proof of the HOA's overreach. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we couldn't fix everything, but we could try. And sometimes, trying is enough. Hope, as it turned out, was a fragile thing. Just when our rebellion began to gain momentum, disaster struck. It started with Claire. One afternoon, she received a letter from the HOA, a formal notice about her dog, Max. Apparently, his occasional barking had become a nuisance that violated noise ordinances. The fine was steep, far more than she could afford on her teacher's salary. When she refused to pay, the HOA didn't hesitate. They filed a lion against her property. Watching Claire crumble broke something inside me. This wasn't just about rules anymore. It was about power. Pure, unrelenting control. Her dream home, the one she'd worked so hard for, was now at risk because of a dog who barked maybe twice a week. How could anyone think this was fair? That's when Margaret delivered her ultimatum. She summoned me to her office, a sterile, overly air-conditioned room filled with binders and framed certificates. Sitting behind her polished desk, she looked every bit the part of someone used to getting her way. "Let's cut to the chase," she said, leaning forward slightly. "You've been stirring up trouble lately, questioning policies, rallying neighbors. I'll be honest, it's disruptive. And if you don't fall in line, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Fines, legal action, public notices sent to all residents detailing your violations. Trust me, no one wants that kind of attention." For a moment, I considered giving in. Fighting back meant risking everything, our savings, our peace of mind, maybe even our home. But then I thought about Claire's tear-streaked face, the whispered warnings from other neighbors, and the suffocating weight of living under constant surveillance. No, enough was enough. With Claire's blessing, we decided to take a stand, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who'd been silenced by fear. Our plan was simple yet daring. Present a united front at the next HOA meeting and demand reforms. Transparency, accountability, fairness, basic human decency. If Margaret refused, we'd go public with social media posts, news outlets, anything to shine a light on Willow Creek's dark underbelly. The night of the meeting, tension crackled in the air like static electricity. Dozens of us packed into the clubhouse, outnumbering the usual attendees. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now sat shoulder to shoulder, united by a shared purpose. When Margaret took the podium, her smile faltered. She tried to brush off our concerns, dismissing them as misunderstandings or exaggerations. But we weren't backing down. One by one, People stood up to share their stories. A single dad talked about being fined for letting his kids draw chalk art on the driveway. A retired couple recounted how they were penalized for planting flowers that weren't on the approved list. Each story chipped away at Margaret's facade until finally she snapped. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, slamming her hands on the table. "You're ruining everything we've worked for." "No," I said, standing slowly. My voice shook, but I forced myself to keep going. "What's ridiculous is thinking you can control people's lives like this. What's ridiculous is punishing someone for having a dog or hanging wind chimes. We're not perfect little robots, Margaret. We're human beings." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time, I saw real fear flash across Margaret's face. Whatever power she thought she held was slipping through her fingers, and she knew it. The night of the big meeting felt like the climax of a storm we'd been building toward for months. The clubhouse was packed, buzzing with nervous energy. Neighbors who had once avoided each other now sat side by side, united by a shared purpose. Some clutched notes scribbled on scraps of paper. Others held phones ready to record everything. Claire sat next to me, her hands trembling but determined. "We've got this," she whispered, though I wasn't sure if she was trying to convince me or herself. When Margaret took the podium, her usual calm demeanor was gone. She scanned the room, her eyes darting from face to face, clearly unsettled by the sheer number of people present. For weeks, she dismissed our concerns, calling us troublemakers and ungrateful. But tonight, there was no ignoring us. We weren't just a few disgruntled homeowners anymore. We were an army. Margaret started off strong, her voice firm, as she reiterated the importance of rules and standards. "Willow Creek is a special place," she said, her tone measured but strained. "Our guidelines exist to protect your investments, your property values. Without them, this neighborhood would fall into chaos." Her words hung in the air, met with silence. Then someone near the back stood up, a young father named Mark. "My son drew pictures with chalk on our driveway last summer," he said, his voice steady. "I got fined $50 because it disrupted the aesthetic. Tell me, Margaret, how does a 6-year-old's artwork hurt property values?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Another neighbor stood, a retired woman named Mrs. Peterson. "I was fined for planting sunflowers in my garden," she added. "They said they were too tall and didn't match the approved color scheme." Sunflowers. Can you believe that? One by one, people rose to share their stories. Each account was more infuriating than the last. Fines for leaving blinds open at night, penalties for parking in driveways during street cleaning hours, even warnings about holiday decorations deemed excessive. Margaret tried to interrupt, to defend herself, but her protests were drowned out by voices that had been silenced for too long. Finally, it was my turn. I stood slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. "Margaret," I began, my voice shaking but clear, "you talk about protecting property values, but what about protecting people? What about letting us live without feeling like we're being watched every second of every day?" I held up the anonymous note I'd found months ago. "This isn't about rules. It's about control. It's about fear. And enough is enough." The room erupted in applause, louder than I'd ever heard it. Margaret looked panicked, her polished facade cracking under the weight of collective anger. She tried to regain control, raising her hands for quiet, but no one listened. Instead, someone shouted, "Let's vote her out." The chant spread quickly. "Vote her out. Vote her out," until the walls seemed to shake with it. That's when things took an unexpected turn. As the crowd pressed forward, demanding action, 2 police officers appeared at the door. Everyone froze, unsure what to expect. Had Margaret called them? Were they here to shut us down? But then something remarkable happened. One of the officers stepped inside, holding up a hand for calm. "We receive reports of potential misuse of authority," he said, glancing at Margaret. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions about these alleged violations and whether filing formal complaints over minor issues constitutes abuse of power." Margaret's face went pale. "This is outrageous," she sputtered. "You can't possibly take their side." The officer frowned. "Actually, ma'am, we have evidence suggesting otherwise. You're coming with us." As they led her away in handcuffs, the room fell silent, stunned by what had just unfolded. No one cheered or celebrated. It was surreal, almost unbelievable. For so long, Margaret had loomed over us like an untouchable force. Seeing her stripped of her power was both satisfying and sobering. After she was gone, the atmosphere shifted. People hugged, cried, laughed nervously. It felt like waking up from a bad dream. Claire turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." But even in that moment of triumph, I knew this was only the beginning. Winning wasn't just about removing Margaret. It was about rebuilding Willow Creek into a place where everyone could truly belong. The days following Margaret's arrest were a whirlwind of change. Willow Creek, once a place where fear and control ruled, began to transform in ways I never thought possible. Without her iron grip, the HOA board disbanded, leaving behind a vacuum of power. At first, there was uncertainty. What would replace it? Would things fall apart without strict rules? But slowly, something beautiful emerged, a new system built on trust, collaboration, and respect. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves started showing up at each other's doors, not with complaints, but with coffee and conversation. Someone organized a block party, complete with potluck dishes and music. For the first time, kids played freely in the streets, their laughter echoing through the quiet cul-de-sacs. People began personalizing their homes in ways that reflected them. Bold-colored front doors, quirky garden gnomes, and yes, even wind chimes. The neighborhood felt alive in a way it never had before. Claire became the unofficial leader of this revolution. She spearheaded a committee to rewrite the guidelines, focusing not on punishment, but on community spirit. "Let's make rules that bring us together," she said during one meeting, "not tear us apart." The new standards were simple and flexible. Keep your yard tidy, be considerate of noise levels, and if you're unsure about something, just talk to your neighbor. No fines, no threats, just common sense and kindness. For me, the biggest change came during the holiday season. After everything that happened, I decided to go all out with Christmas decorations. Strings of lights twinkled across our roofline, candy canes hung from the porch railing, and an inflatable snowman wobbled cheerfully in the yard. When Ryan asked if I was worried about backlash, I shook my head. "Not anymore," I said. "If anyone has a problem, they can come knock on our door, and we'll figure it out together." And guess what? No one complained. In fact, several neighbors stopped by to compliment the display. One family even brought over homemade cookies as a thank you for inspiring them to decorate their own house. It was such a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. This was what community was supposed to feel like. Looking back, I realize how much I learned through the chaos. Standing up for yourself isn't easy. It takes courage, patience, and sometimes a little bit of rebellion. But it's worth it. Willow Creek taught me that perfection isn't the same as happiness. Real life is messy, unpredictable, and imperfect. And that's what makes it beautiful. One evening, as I sat on the porch sipping hot cocoa, I noticed something I hadn't seen in months. Stars. Without the oppressive weight of judgment hanging over us, people seemed lighter, freer. Even the air felt cleaner, fresher. A group of kids ran past, laughing as they chased after fireflies. Somewhere down the street, someone strummed a guitar, the melody floating softly through the night. Ryan joined me on the porch, handing me a mug of cocoa. "You did good," he said, smiling. "We all did." I nodded, leaning into him. "Yeah, we did." As the lights twinkled above us and the sound of laughter filled the air, I realized something important. Willow Creek wasn't perfect, but neither was I. And maybe that was okay, because for the first time, I felt like I belonged, not because I fit some rigid mold, but because I was finally free to be myself.